Think about the last time you woke up genuinely happy. Not just not miserable, actually happy. Where the first feeling you had when consciousness came back was something close to okay, maybe even good. Where you did not immediately feel the weight of everything waiting for you before your eyes were fully open. Most people cannot, and they assume that is just how mornings are. That waking up feeling heavy and flat and already behind is the default human experience. But here's what those people do not know. Your emotional state when you wake up tomorrow is not determined by tomorrow. It is determined by what you do tonight. The neuroscience on this is not subtle and it is not new. Your brain spends the hours of sleep actively setting the chemical and neurological conditions for the following day. And if you do nothing to influence that process, your brain defaults to whatever state you left it in when you closed your eyes. Which, for most people, after a day of scrolling and stress and unresolved tension and blue light at 11 p.m., is not a good state to wake up from. Tonight is not just the end of today, it is the setup for tomorrow. And if you learn what to do in the last 60 to 90 minutes before you sleep, you can walk into tomorrow with a brain that is primed for focus, for energy, for something that actually feels like a good mood rather than a managed one. Stay with me through habit number 4. That is the one that most people have never heard of, and that produces the fastest measurable shift in morning mood. Do not skip it. Habit number 1, the emotional closure ritual. And no, it is not journaling the way you think. Here is something your brain desperately needs that almost nobody gives it. A clear signal that today is over. Your brain does not have an automatic off switch for the day. It does not receive a notification that says today's events have been filed and you can now move on. Instead, it keeps the day open as a running process in the background, burning through cognitive and emotional resources even while you are trying to wind down. The stress from the meeting is still active. The frustration from the conversation is still loaded. The guilt about the thing you did not finish is still running. All of it sits in what psychologists call working memory, taking up space, generating low-level emotional activation that quietly poisons your sleep quality and your morning mood. The fix is deceptively simple. You need to deliberately close the day, not process everything, not solve everything. Just formally acknowledge that today is done. Here's exactly how to do it, and it takes under 3 minutes. You sit somewhere quiet, not in bed yet, and you mentally run through the day in reverse, starting from right now and going back to the morning. Not to analyze or judge, just to observe. You are watching a highlight reel, fast, no commentary. And as you reach each significant moment, you do one thing. You say internally, that happened, it is part of today, and today is finished. That is the entire practice. What this does neurologically is activate your prefrontal cortex in a controlled, structured way right before sleep, which signals to your limbic system, the emotional brain, that the threat assessment for the day is complete. You are telling your amygdala, there is nothing left to monitor tonight. Researchers studying pre-sleep cognitive routines have found that structured temporal closure significantly reduces rumination during sleep onset and improves sleep architecture, meaning you spend more time in the deep restorative stages. You wake up with a brain that finished processing today instead of one that was still stuck in it at 3 in the morning. Habit number 2, the dopamine protection window. This one is the habit most people are actively violating every single night. Dopamine is the chemical most people associate with pleasure, but that is only part of the story. Dopamine is actually the brain's primary motivation and anticipation chemical. It is what makes you feel like things are worth doing, like tomorrow has something in it for you, like getting out of bed has a point. And the way your brain calibrates its dopamine system overnight is directly linked to what you expose it to in the last hour before sleep. Here is the mechanism. When you scroll through social media, watch stimulating video content, or consume anything that triggers a rapid, unpredictable reward, your brain releases small bursts of dopamine in quick succession. This feels neutral or even slightly pleasant in the moment, but what it is actually doing is desensitizing your dopamine receptors. Your brain, flooded with low-quality dopamine hits for 30 or 60 minutes before sleep, responds by downregulating its sensitivity to dopamine overall. Then you sleep, and you wake up the next morning with a dopamine system that is slightly blunted, slightly less sensitive to reward, which means the things that would normally feel motivating, a good breakfast, the sunlight, a plan for the day, feel flat, muted, like someone turned the brightness down on everything. And you call it a bad morning. But it started the night before, when you handed your dopamine system a fire hose of cheap stimulation right before it tried to reset. The dopamine protection window is simple. No algorithm-driven content for the last 60 minutes before bed. That means no social media feeds, no short-form video, no news aggregators, nothing where the next piece of content is selected by an engagement-maximizing system designed to keep you clicking. The reason these specifically are the problem is not the screen, it is the unpredictability. Slot machine reward patterns, which is exactly what the algorithm is designed to replicate, produce the most aggressive dopamine receptor desensitization of any content type. Reading, even on a screen, does not do this. Watching something you intentionally chose does not do this. It is the infinite, unpredictable, autoplay scroll that is the issue. Protect the last hour. Let your dopamine system reset overnight without interference. Tomorrow morning, things will feel different. Habit number 3, the body temperature drop trick, 20 seconds of action that changes your sleep chemistry. Your core body temperature and your emotional state the following morning are more directly connected than almost anyone realizes. Here is the science. Your brain uses the drop in core body temperature as one of its primary signals to begin releasing melatonin and initiating the sleep sequence. The faster and more smoothly that temperature drop happens, the faster you fall asleep, the more time you spend in slow-wave deep sleep, and the more complete the overnight emotional processing and memory consolidation becomes. Not cold, cool. Your hands and feet are the primary surfaces through which your body dumps heat because they have a high density of blood vessels close to the skin surface specifically for this purpose. By briefly cooling them, you accelerate the heat dumping process, which drives your core temperature down faster. This is not a wellness trend. Thermal regulation research from the Psychiatric University Hospital in Basel found measurable improvements in sleep onset and slow-wave sleep duration from exactly this kind of targeted peripheral cooling. 20 seconds. Cool water on your hands and feet before bed. Your brain gets deeper sleep. Your emotional processing runs more completely. You wake up lighter. Habit number 4, the morning intention preload. And this is the one nobody talks about. Most people think of intentions as something you set in the morning. You wake up, maybe you meditate or journal, and you decide what kind of day you want to have. That is fine, but it is catching the train after it already left the station. Here is what the research on prospective memory and sleep-based consolidation actually shows. The last thing you focus your attention on before falling asleep gets preferentially processed and consolidated during REM sleep. Your brain, during the dreaming stage, rehearses and strengthens whatever neural pathways were most recently active. This is why anxiety spirals at night are so damaging. You feed your brain a loop of worry right before sleep and it rehearses the worry all night. But this mechanism works in both directions. If you deliberately prime your brain with a specific intention right before sleep, your brain will rehearse that instead. Not magically, not in some mystical law of attraction sense. Neurologically, the pathways associated with that intention get activated during REM consolidation. They get stronger, they become more accessible. So when you wake up, the neural architecture for that intention is already partially warmed up. Here is the exact practice. As you're lying in bed, in the dark, right at the edge of sleep, you ask yourself one question. Not what do I need to do tomorrow? Not what am I worried about? The question is this: how do I want to feel when I wake up? And then you stay with whatever answer comes. Not visualizing elaborate scenarios, just holding the feeling. Calm, capable, clear, whatever it is for you. You hold it loosely, without effort, and let yourself drift towards sleep with it as the last conscious input. Researchers studying pre-sleep suggestion and morning effect have found that this kind of intentional emotional priming before sleep produces measurable differences in self-reported morning mood and in cortisol awakening response. People who practice this consistently have a lower and more controlled cortisol awakening response, which translates directly into feeling less immediately stressed and more composed in the first moments of the day. Your brain spent the night rehearsing calm. It wakes up closer to calm. It is that mechanistic, it is that real. Habit number 5, the light environment reset. The thing your brain is using to set your mood before you are even aware of being awake. Your mood upon waking is not determined by the first thought you have. It is determined by the first signal your brain receives. And in the minutes before full consciousness returns, your brain is already reading environmental data and making decisions about how to configure your neurochemistry for the coming hours. The most powerful of those signals is light, specifically the the type and intensity of light your eyes encounter in the first few minutes of waking. Here is the neuroscience. Your retinas contain specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells do not contribute to vision. Their entire job is to detect ambient light levels and report directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is your brain's master circadian clock. The suprachiasmatic nucleus uses this information to time the release of cortisol, serotonin, and dopamine for the day. If the first light your eyes encounter is the blue spectrum, high-intensity light of a phone screen at full brightness in a dark room, your brain receives a signal that is neurologically similar to midday sunlight. It triggers a cortisol spike that is too sharp, too fast, and too intense for the early morning period. You feel immediately wired and stressed before you have done a single thing. If the first light is natural or warm and dim, the cortisol awakening response is graduated and appropriate. You feel alert but not alarmed, energized but not anxious. What you do tonight to set up your morning light environment will determine which of those two experiences you have tomorrow. Tonight, before you sleep, do 3 things. First, charge your phone somewhere other than next to your bed so it is not the first thing your hand reaches for. Second, if you use blackout curtains, set them to allow a small amount of natural light to begin entering around your intended wake time, or invest in a sunrise alarm that simulates gradual dawn. Third, if you must use your phone in the first minutes of waking, reduce the brightness to minimum before you sleep so it is already set when you reach for it. These are 30-second actions tonight. Their effect on your morning mood is not minor. The light environment reset is the sleeper habit, no pun intended, that most people are not taking seriously, and that is quietly shaping how every single morning feels before breakfast, before coffee, before a single decision has been made. Now let's bring all of this together because the sequence matters. You do the emotional closure ritual first, around 60 to 90 minutes before bed, to formally close the day and stop the background processing your brain would otherwise run all night. You enter the dopamine protection window immediately after, removing algorithm-driven content from the last hour so your dopamine receptors can reset overnight without interference. Before getting into bed, you do the body temperature drop, 20 to 30 seconds of cool water on your hands and feet to accelerate the thermal drop that triggers deep restorative sleep. As you lie down, you do the morning intention preload, holding the feeling you want to wake up with as your last conscious input so your brain has something worth rehearsing during REM. And tonight, before you close your eyes, you set up your morning light environment so the first signal your brain receives tomorrow is one that produces energy without anxiety. 5 habits. The first 4 take under 10 minutes combined. The 5th takes 30 seconds. And what they produce is a brain that wakes up tomorrow having actually finished the work it needed to do overnight. Most people treat the night as the end of the day. The people who consistently wake up feeling good treat it as the beginning of tomorrow, not with elaborate rituals, not with expensive supplements or hour-long wind-down protocols, with a handful of deliberate, neurologically grounded choices that work with how the brain actually functions rather than against it. Your brain is going to do something tonight regardless of what you choose. It is going to process today, consolidate memories, run its maintenance cycles, and set your neurochemical baseline for tomorrow. The only question is whether you give it the right conditions to do that well, or whether you hand it a chaotic, overstimulated, thermally unregulated, intentionally blank slate, and hope for the best. Tonight you know the difference. Tomorrow morning you will feel it. Drop in the comments what time you usually fall asleep and how you typically feel in the first 5 minutes of waking. Honestly, I want to know where most people are starting from. And if someone you know is stuck in the cycle of bad mornings and exhausted nights, send this to them tonight before they reach for the phone again.